According to the story's setting, unless a large-scale war breaks out, powerhouses at the level of Universe Venerable or above are strictly forbidden from setting foot on the extraterritorial battlefield. As for invincible king immortals like King Jinyan, whose combat strength is comparable to those weakest Universe Venerables, there simply aren't any opponents on the battlefield worthy of fighting them. For existences of that level, slaying a peak king immortal is effortless. Even if hundreds of limit king immortals were to join forces, they would still be unable to inflict any meaningful harm. Such beings could easily slaughter at will across the battlefield. However, excessive killing would shatter the delicate balance among the four great factions, stirring widespread outrage. After all, the powers constantly restrain one another. Once one faction becomes too dominant, the other three would temporarily unite to punish the one who broke the balance. Unless one possesses absolute power to face all three sides at once, almost no one dares to violate this unspoken rule, thus forming a silent understanding that governs the battlefield. It was precisely because of this that Luo Feng deliberately limited his number of hunts to 3 battles per day in the early stages of enslaving soul slaves, so as not to draw excessive attention. Yet even so, when news spread that nearly 50 powerful beings had perished because of him, it caused a great uproar. If the higher-ups of the hostile alien races were to learn that the actual number of king immortals who perished to his hands had exceeded 100, they would have long since issued an order to jointly besiege King Blade River. For this very reason, because of that implicit balance, invincible king immortals like King Jinyan find little purpose in venturing into the extraterritorial battlefield, as it offers them virtually no room for meaningful training or experience. Hence, they rarely, if ever, set foot in that war zone. Compared to the extremely rare invincible king immortals, those at the limit king immortal stage, whose strength approaches that invincible tier, are slightly more numerous. On the 7th battlefield, there are 9 such beings, each among the most formidable elites in that war zone. Among them stands King Lifefall, a powerhouse of the automaton race. It is well known that the combat power of the automaton race relies almost entirely on the advanced technological weaponry developed within their own civilization. As long as they possess sufficient wealth, they can unleash power far beyond their actual level. Take Zvika as an example. Though only a peak marquee immortal, he can unleash attacks capable of threatening even peak king immortals. Of course, that's only when he fights by remotely controlling mechanical puppets instead of engaging in direct combat. After all, when one's attack power far exceeds their physical endurance, defense becomes a fatal weakness. No matter how sophisticated one's defenses are, if they cannot withstand the shockwaves caused by the attacks, the result is inevitable self-destruction and death. For this reason, technological weaponry alone could never create a being as terrifyingly strong as the King Lifefall. His personal power is equally astonishing. Even without any technological equipment, his ordinary attacks could easily obliterate a low-tier king immortal. And once he unleashes his hidden trump cards, he can effortlessly slay peak or even limit king immortals, where one such weapon being the automaton race's super single-soldier weapon, the Disintegration Tower. Moreover, the automatons are deeply influenced by the pyramid doctrine, holding an almost fanatical belief in hierarchical order. Within such a rigid system, King Lifefall has built an enormous mechanical kingdom composed of countless loyal automaton immortals who obey his every command, further amplifying his maximum combat strength. This allows the automaton race to often dominate battlefields through sheer numerical superiority. Yet, despite his overwhelming might, even King Lifefall is not considered one of the automaton race's core nurtured elites. It must be understood that those assigned to execute assassination missions are rarely part of the true inner circle. After all, they are constantly exposed to life and death danger and, when necessary, can even be abandoned by their race as expendable pawns. Similar to the automaton race, the Zerg queens also rely on commanding vast numbers of puppets, the Zerg warriors, as their primary means of combat. In large-scale battles, whether it be the automatons or the Zerg queens, if they cannot secure victory through absolute power, the loss of their puppets is almost inevitable. However, unlike mechanical puppets, even if the enemy does not take away the remains of the slain Zerg, the Zerg queen cannot simply replace her perished warriors on a one-for-one basis. It must be understood that mechanical puppets often suffer only the destruction of their internal core components in battle, while their outer shells remain intact. As long as their enemies do not claim them, the automatons can simply replace the damaged cores and reuse the same units. But Zerg warriors are fundamentally different. Though often referred to as puppets, they are in truth living beings. Once killed, they cannot be repaired like machines, but the Zerg queen must gestate and breed entirely new lifeforms, a process that demands far greater cost and time. Even so, a Zerg hive in its prime remains a terrifying kingdom of the swarm. It is well known that for a World Master level Zerg Queen to break through to the Immortal level is far more difficult than for even a Space Beast, mainly due to the exceedingly high comprehension required of the original laws. Furthermore, the Zerg Queen can flexibly adjust the number of Zerg warriors under her command based on battlefield conditions, altering her combat strategies at will. When controlling thousands of Zerg warriors, she can still channel attacks imbued with the power of the laws. Once the swarm grows to tens of thousands, she can only perform ordinary attacks, but even then, sheer numbers alone create an overwhelming advantage. And if she were to unleash the power of 1,000,000 Zerg warriors in a single coordinated energy assault, even a peak King Immortal could perish instantly under that blow. Thus, even a World Master level Zerg Queen possesses combat strength comparable to a Marquis Immortal. Should an immortal army lord of the human race encounter a Zerg hive of such a level, survival would be nearly impossible. Owing to their deep understanding of the original laws and their crushing numerical superiority, once a Zerg Queen advances to the immortal level, she becomes almost invincible beneath the universe venerable level. For this very reason, the Zerg hierarchy has no need for titles such as Marquis or King, where there is simply no distinction between them in power. Of course, almost invincible does not mean truly invincible among the immortal ranks. After all, genuine invincible King Immortals such as King Jinyan possess combat power comparable to weakest Universe Venerables and can even escape alive when being hunted by low-tier Universe Venerables. While an immortal Zerg hive may not match such beings in direct battle, if it seizes the right opportunity and channels the full energy of 1,000,000 Zerg warriors, even an invincible King Immortal without an Arcana's protection would have no hope of survival. And among these terrifying entities stands one whose name alone inspires dread, the Zerg Queen Nanchang. However, whether relying on vast mechanical puppet armies or employing the Zerg swarm tactics, both strategies share one undeniable limitation. These number-based approaches indeed hold tremendous advantages in the boundless expanses of the universe space, where open space allows for full deployment. Yet, once the battlefield is confined within a relatively limited area, summoning too many units becomes counterproductive, where the crowded environment restricts movement and severely diminishes their overall combat effectiveness. For instance, within the Sacrificial Tower, Zvika's many tactical options were completely constrained by the narrow space, leaving his actions hampered at every turn. Similarly, within the forbidden spaces of the Star Tower, though far more expansive than the Sacrificial Tower, the area remains ultimately limited. Furthermore, under the Star Tower's guidance, countless powerful beings were gathered into the same forbidden space, greatly reducing the threat of the swarm strategy. After all, within such confined environments, the Zerg Queen's ability to coordinate large-scale group assaults becomes severely hindered, and many of her intricate formation attacks cannot be executed smoothly. By contrast, in such limited or localized battlefields, individuals capable of dominating the arena through their own overwhelming strength become far more dangerous. Among them, the demon race's King Black Tomb is one of the most prominent examples. In fact, King Black Tomb was neither born of royal nor imperial blood. His circumstances were quite similar to Nulan Shan's and even more tragic. Having offended numerous powerful figures within his clan, he was forced to flee into the extraterritorial battlefield while still at the domain master level. Yet unlike Nulan Shan, King Black Tomb rose to prominence amidst endless slaughter, earning remarkable achievements that eventually drew the attention of his clan's upper echelons once again. In time, he was reclassified as a core figure to be cultivated, even receiving direct assistance from powerful members of his race, who helped him eliminate all his former enemies once and for all. Imagine if Nulan Shan had also distinguished himself on the extraterritorial battlefield and successfully caught the attention of the Huge Axe Dojo or any other top-tier faction, then perhaps his conflict with Luo Feng might have been peacefully resolved through the mediation of their powerful backers. After all, to those true supreme forces, disputes over a mere planet are utterly trivial. But Nulan Shan never had the chances, for the one he provoked was none other than Luo Feng, the most gifted cultivator in the history of mankind, and thus his fate was sealed before he could ever truly grow. Within the human alliance, there was also a powerhouse whose aura was no weaker than that of King Black Tomb, King Seven Swords. In fact, large-scale talent selections were not exclusive to the Virtual Universe Company. The Huge Axe Dojo also held its own periodic recruitments. King Seven Swords had emerged as the top genius of his generation in one such selection, his cultivation talent even surpassing that of Bolin. Of course, compared to supreme prodigies like Kudi or Venerable Fire Erosion, his cultivation speed was still far inferior. Even so, after breaking through to immortality and apprenticing under a universe master, he rose in just tens of thousands of years to become an existence nearing the invincible King Immortal stage. His strength was almost on par with that of King Jinyan. Because of this, he was listed by the automaton race as their third highest assassination priority. In fact, each race's assassination or elimination list was not universal but rather customized based on how threatening the target was to their own kind. For example, a super genius with profound mastery in the soul aspects might pose a major threat to the demon race, but would be far less dangerous to the Zerg or automaton race. After all, every Zerg queen was herself a soul master capable of commanding vast swarms in battle. Unless one's soul mastery far exceeded hers, it was almost impossible to inflict real damage. Meanwhile, members of the automaton race had no true souls to begin with unless one could directly assault their consciousness or will through illusion techniques. Soul attacks were nearly useless against them. As such, the assassination target rankings varied among races. However, Luo Feng occupied the top position on every race's kill list, which proof of how great a threat he represented. As a powerhouse of the spiritual energy lineage, King Seven Swords also posed immense danger to the automatons. After all, it was far easier for a spiritual master to teleport objects than themselves, where they could annihilate massive mechanical puppets in an instant, disrupt enemy formations, and cripple entire legion strategies. Especially terrifying were figures like King Seven Swords, who wielded heavy-grade treasure spiritual weapons alongside high-rank defensive heavy treasure, making him an extremely difficult opponent to deal with. Like Luo Feng and King Jinyan, King Seven Swords also cultivated the path of the Beast God. It's worth mentioning that Law Fusion possessed the unique ability of power stacking. Therefore, as long as one attains sufficient mastery in the path of the Beast God, regardless of which lower law and its corresponding higher law they choose to fuse, it's possible for them to ascend to the level of an invincible King Immortal. For these nearly invincible powerhouses, before Luo Feng had received the inheritance of the Star Tower, he stood no chance at all. If he were to confront them, even with the aid of his Sure Wu wings, he would find it almost impossible to escape once his opponent began burning their divine body, unless he forcibly tore open space and entered the interspatial layer, relying on the raging spatial currents within to barely make his escape. After all, whether in comprehension of the original laws or in power of base strength, Luo Feng was still far behind them. However, once he completed the Star Tower inheritance and underwent a qualitative transformation in strength, everything changed. At that point, Luo Feng truly possessed the qualifications to face such powerhouses head-on. Though he would still be slightly at a disadvantage in a direct clash and forced into defense, the choice between fighting and retreating was now entirely his to make. It must be noted that after completing the inheritance, Luo Feng not only obtained the General Soul, but was also granted by Sitting Mountain Guest a spiritual weapon that barely reached the Arcana level, the Star Scroll. The term barely was only by the standards of a weapon-forging God King. To other powerhouses, even the Primal Chaos City leader, it was a true arcana. With the empowerment of General Soul, combined with Luo Feng's immense willpower and consciousness, even though his control level only reached the peak King Immortal stage, when he used the Star Scroll to unleash secret techniques through multiple sealed stars, the immense, condensed mighty summon was enough to withstand even beings like King Black Tomb. Moreover, with the Sure Wu wings aiding him, unless he faced a special life form possessing a unique speed type innate secret technique, Luo Feng's speed, which considered the absolute fastest beneath the King Immortal level, made the decision to fight or flee rest entirely upon his will. Well, that's all for this video. Thanks for watching this video. Wish you a wonderful day.